This episode of the Music Production Podcast is brought to you by Splice. Splice is the creative hub for the modern musician. One of my favorite services on Splice is Sounds, where you can browse and download over 2 million premium royalty-free samples, loops, presets, and sound effects for your projects. You've got exclusive artist packs. You can create your own packs, and you can download these sounds and put them right inside your projects. Head over to splice.com/AfroDJMac-music and use the code AfroDJMac to get a free month subscription to Splice Sounds. How's it going, everybody, and welcome to the Music Production Podcast. My name is Brian Funk. I'm your host. I make music as AfroDJMac, and on this show we like to talk about all things making music, producing music, writing, philosophy, creativity, you name it. And today I'm very excited to have a chance to talk to Madeline Bloom. Madeline runs the site Sonic Bloom, which is all things Ableton Live, Push, Max for Live. Great resource for anyone using those particular softwares. How's it going, Madeline?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really good. I'm very happy we had a chance to make this work out. We've been trying to schedule this for a little while. And it's really nice to get a chance to talk to you because we're kind of in the same world in that we're both producing a lot of material for Ableton Live users, packs, downloads, tutorials.
Yeah,
and you've always been so supportive of my work too. So it's great to get a chance to talk to you.
Oh yeah, you've got nice stuff like you kind of seem to have a similar philosophy when it comes to kind of making sound packs. So I felt that was like an easy thing. I always like to share your free live packs because they're really nice for people also to kind of check out how it could be done for them as well, I think.
Yeah, thank you for that. I've got plenty of your devices in my user library too.
I actually have to clean up my user library. It's a total mess.
Yeah, I think the same thing about mine. So much stuff going on in there, and I think it's actually starting to get in the way of actually creating some work and getting things done.
Yeah, that's my Max for Live folder. It's way too big at this point.
Yeah, that's kind of a problem I have too. I just download things like crazy. But fortunately, they've got the new collections in Live 10, which has helped me sort of start to organize my files and get things together and keep track of the things that I'm actually going to use when I'm making music.
I'm basically telling all my students, but I haven't really properly gotten around to doing that yet. So yeah, that's the plan for hopefully next week.
Well, it's not exactly the most fun thing in the world to be organizing your samples and presets around.
No, especially because it was like, for me, the most important thing was finally finishing my next album because I've been dragging it out for years, basically. So,
how far along are you with the album?
I think I'm finished. The only thing left now is listening to the mixes on different systems.
Oh, nice.
Of some more systems, especially the really shitty ones. And then finding the track order and then kind of like making the pauses, putting in the pauses and mastering. That's really it.
Ah, so you're trying to make sure it sounds good in every system, not just your studio.
Yeah, you always do that. Like with my debut album, I came to the mastering studio and they were like, "But it's pre-mastered already, isn't it?" I was like, "No, it's just mixed." Because I feel like, no, that doesn't quite sound right, and I'm never sure. I was never sure if I could, if it was good enough that it could just be mastered. And I didn't have any money, so I could be mastered again.
Right.
So I had to make sure that it sounds really good. And I'm a bit dirty when it comes to EQing. I do a lot of EQing, so.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time listening to songs in different listening environments, not just the studio, because you can get it to sound really nice in the studio, but then you take it into your car, which is where I actually listen to a lot of music on my own. And it will sound pretty different in the car. And I'm thinking, like, what happened here? And you got to go back.
Mm-hmm.
You make sacrifices, you start changing things. So maybe it doesn't sound perfect in the studio and it doesn't sound perfect in the car, but you sort of find like a balance where it sounds pretty good everywhere you listen to it.
Yeah, I still have like those free airplane headphones that they don't give out anymore for free.
Nice.
And they're really terrible.
Right.
But some people really have that as like what they listen to on their, like, it's just pretty crazy.
Cheap foam.
Yeah, and so like I find, and I still have my old boom box as well and things, and like the the speakers that I grew up with, and they're
Nice.
pretty bad. They have like no bass, not many
course.
highs, and just the mid range is good. So if you have any trouble in the mid range in your mix, this is like you listen on that, and then you go, okay, yeah, that has to be that. Oh, it's the Rhodes or whatever. So you can really hear it. So I find that really helpful. And I always kind of switch in between as well. Even when I'm mixing, I'm switching between my monitors and my iMac speakers, because I know by now which kind of which frequencies the iMac makes kind of vibrate in certain ways, different spots as well. So that can be helpful, just kind of like, oh yeah, it's that range, should be this instrument.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot where you listen in one place and you hear this nice full track, but then you get back to maybe listen on your phone or your computer, iMac, and you say to yourself, hey, where'd the bass go?
There's no bass left, yeah.
No, there's no bass, and all the sub bass is just nowhere to be found in the mix.
Yeah, well, the sub bass definitely not, but like especially even the normal bass range is just too weak to stand on its own. You just go like, there's pretty much no bass left anymore. Great, nice bass line.
Yeah, right. All that bass you worked on for those hours.
Yeah.
I actually listen back to my mixes on my cell phone because,
Yeah,
I find a lot of kids especially listen to most of their music on their iPhone. They're just kind of playing it and listening to it with their friends. And it's important that you get that sounding, sounding well in those situations.
Yeah, but then again, like a good mix should sound halfway decent in all systems as well. So if it's, I mean, on phone speakers, it's never going to sound great. But if it sounds halfway all right, then your mix is solid enough, I think.
Well, that's a pretty exciting place to be with the album. Now you're moving along to those stages and getting ready to release it, I guess, unless there's any discovery of any major mistakes or problems with the mix, right?
Well, I shouldn't have much any more left because I've basically been mixing most of the songs for like years now, because I kept listening to the songs when I got really sick, and then the mix wasn't done. And so I got used to the sound of it, and I just couldn't figure out what was the right way to mix it anymore. And it was just a nightmare, and I had to use analyzing tools like visual stuff as well and so on to kind of just figure out what might be right, because I felt like I couldn't trust my ears anymore. And I basically just I wrote one song like in the last 2 years and one song this year. It's like my output is terrible at the moment. I'm gonna have to get that up to a better number. So
Yes, kind of reminds me of something that I go through a lot, where I do a lot of my songs live. I do a lot of the writing for live performance. And I, therefore, don't really have to commit to my arrangements too much. So I've got all these songs where the arrangement's very loose. One night I might extend one part or add another part here, change something. And I find it really hard because I don't almost have like a proper way to do this song. And there's all of these different options that I have that I find it really hard to actually commit to a real arrangement for the track.
all right. See, I kind of never really have that problem anymore, because I first write and produce a song and then I play it live.
Yeah, my workflow has changed in a lot of ways so that I actually do it kind of backwards, where I'm making my live performances and then I'm trying to commit them to actual songs like that might be released on an album or something.
Plus, in a live situation, it has to fit the moment, like the crowd and the energy in the room and everything. Whereas in a production, it has to be like the right thing for like listening to it for like 1,000 times or more, hopefully. So yeah, I completely understand that.
Right. So how do you deal with that? Like once you get so close to your tracks where you've heard them all of these times, how do you go about moving forward from there?
Yeah, well, for me, one thing was basically staying away from them, not listening to them at all for a while. And then for me personally was getting my health in order, because I noticed later on that my sensors were kind of not good anymore either, because I was really nutrient deficient at some point. So that meant like my eyesight was really bad, as I was really sensitive to light, for example. My eyesight got bad, and I used to have eagle eyes all the time, and so the first step, and it was the same with the ears, but I couldn't tell because it just changed so gradually that you kind of don't notice until it finally gets better again, and then you have the comparison. And so I just couldn't hear things well anymore. And so I basically had to just let everything go for like the music, just go like, well, gonna sort out my health now, gonna run Sonic Bloom, and everything else has to come afterwards. And that's basically one of the reasons why I was honest on my music blog about my health issues as well, because I thought, like, if there are still some people, interested in it, then at least if I say like, well, I'm still here, I'm just dealing with something and I'm not giving up. Because the thing is, these days, a lot of musicians basically have to give up at some point because they can't make enough money with it. And then maybe they even have a family at some point. So there's no leisure time anymore left either. So I just thought like, well, if I let people know, then if there's radio silence for a while, it'll still be all right. And they'll check back, half a year later or something.
Yeah, I think that's something you see a lot with any creative pursuit, really, is that it's so difficult that people will often sort of fade off of it after a little while when they're working on it.
Yeah.
Well, that was something I wanted to talk to you about, actually, the whole health thing, because I think often that's the first thing to go whenever we're working on something or deep in a project. I mean, we live in a society that really glamorizes this hardworking, never stopping, working 29 hours a day, never going to sleep, and just powering through. But really, it's an important thing to pay attention to, and it's often the first thing to go when we get really busy.
Yeah, especially when you start touring as well, because then you have to kind of just get something quick to eat in between. And then people tend to kind of drink and smoke way more as well when they're on tour and so on. So things like that. But like for me, it wasn't even anything like that, because I've always been relatively health conscious with my diet, or at least I thought so until I really looked into the science of it more. But it was actually doctors giving me just way too many antibiotics and not checking what infection I actually had, so they didn't work. And that basically destroyed my gut flora more or less, and it just got gradually worse over the years. And so I got like a lot of food intolerances because the intestinal mucosa gets permeable, and so eventually I would have bled out.
Oh, wow.
And so basically I had to stop taking antibiotics or any medical drugs or anything like that, and just kind of have a really strict diet. Like, it was pretty crazy. Out of 44 tested foods, I had a positive test result for 32, and out of the remaining 12 foods that I was not intolerant to, 5 of them were like meat or fish, and I'd been a vegetarian already, so I couldn't be intolerant. But it still worked, and I learned a lot about like cooking and stuff, and like lots of different foods as well. I went to international supermarkets and stuff like that, like the not German supermarkets, to kind of get different foods that I couldn't be intolerant to because I had never eaten them before. Because I had to keep like a variety of like different foods. So I was never allowed to eat the same thing twice in a row. Really?
Was that to keep track?
Well, that was so that you can't get new intolerances, because the way you get intolerances, like the intestinal mucosa is permeable, so food particles can get into the bloodstream, whereas only the nutrients are supposed to get across the barrier. And then the more that happens, the more you develop intolerances, because you develop antibodies in the blood. And then eventually you become intolerant to like all the healthy foods, and it doesn't matter what you eat. Like, I was at a point where I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be eating anymore, and no one believed me. And I basically used my troubleshooting skills to solve my health issues, because doctors were like, yeah, I think you should get psychotherapy. And I was like, yeah, I don't think that's all in my head. And a student helped me as well, so Sonic Bloom student. So that was useful. It turned out like he was a pediatrician, and he was like, he sent me an email saying like, oh, how are you doing? I've got a little question for you. And I just wrote back, to be honest, I feel terrible. And he Skyped with me and basically sent me a list of tests afterwards that I should have done to make sure that I could, exclude diagnoses or confirm one.
Wow. Yeah, it's something I've been hearing a lot about in podcasts and things that I've been reading is just the importance of our gut flora and the bacteria within our bodies. We normally think of bacteria as a bad thing, it's dirty or something, but really much of our functioning depends on it.
Yeah.
And there's people that are saying there's more bacteria living inside our bodies than there are even people in the entire world, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, they're about half our weight as well.
Wow. Yeah, that's so incredible. And when you take antibiotics, you're not just killing the bad stuff, you're also decimating the entire population of bacteria in your body.
Yeah.
And I found sometimes that like taking antibiotics is sometimes worse than the actual sickness that I'm trying to treat.
I've had that a lot of times, yeah. Yeah, that's because basically in 80% of the immune system is in the gut. So if you mess up the gut flora, part of your immune system goes as well. So instead of successfully fighting an infection, you basically making your body weaker, so it can be attacked by more things, and you kind of get other problems.
Yeah, but I could believe that. Listening a lot to Dr. Rhonda Patrick, who studies gut bacteria, gut flora, and the whole ecosystem, within our bodies, and she's calling.
Okay.
She's calling our gut our second mind because the bacteria within our bodies is actually affecting our moods, our decision making, the way we behave. And it's all, sometimes these bad behaviors are stemming from what's going on in our gut. And yeah, she says it's our second mind.
Yeah, to me that makes total sense, because I was always told that because I was in a bad state emotionally as well when I was so sick, that it must be psychosomatic. But I felt like when my health kept sliding down, that it was my physical health that was going first, and then there was the mental state that was following. And I always, for years I've been feeling like I've lost my gut feeling. And it's kind of funny that we call it that, because it kind of really makes sense, and all that's kind of much better now again, that I've basically changed my diet and reversed most of the intolerances. So I feel like that seems like very true. It's funny how everything to do with the gut and the gut flora, all the studies that kind of just started less than 20 years ago, really. So it's very new, and most doctors don't even know about that stuff. I kept bringing doctors' studies. It's so what about this? And they're like, I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, and I think you kind of tap into an issue in many fields, really, that once you're kind of in the job, it's not always a requirement to continue your professional development and to keep learning. And in the world we live in today, everything's changing so fast, technology, health. So the stuff we're learning in college is already written in textbooks and may very well be quite outdated by the time we actually get into our jobs and have to practice whatever it is that we're doing.
Yeah, especially for example, I had so many symptoms, and in Germany, if you're not privately insured, but have the usual public health insurance, doctors have 7 minutes for you to see you. So it's I can't even just tell you all my symptoms in 7 minutes and all the tests that other doctors have done. So it's basically the whole system is broken. It doesn't really matter what individual doctors are trying to do in it, because they're either bankrupt themselves by just kind of ignoring that, but then they're not getting paid enough, but they will be able to help their patients better because they can listen first and then do more tests as well. or the right tests, but that's like a terrible choice. Do you want to bankrupt yourself and possibly your family as well, or do you just play along with the system?
Yeah, and that's really not a lot of time to get a clear picture of what's going on,
Yeah.
especially when it's something like you're talking about that is so complicated and subtle in many ways.
Yeah, basically anything that's systemic, they send you to lots of specialists, and then they just go like, well, I don't know. I've even had the gastroenterologist, the one that was supposed to figure it out. He told me, like, if you ever figure it out, let me know.
Oh man, that's really not the kind of thing that you want your doctor to say to you.
And especially when you're in a place that the way you get specialist appointments quicker is by you turning up there, because you look so sick, they'll just, pity you and give you an appointment sooner. So that was quite interesting. And for me, like, my resume for that was like that I decided to become vegan, because it's kind of the best for everyone anyways, not just for my health, but like the environment and the animals as well. But for me, it really works really well.
Yeah.
Plus, I love cooking vegan, way more than before.
Yeah, well, I don't really know what it's like in Germany with the diet and all, but here in America, the standard American diet there's a lot of problems with what we're eating.
I think the standard American diet is worse than the standard German diet from what I've seen in like studies and stuff. Like, I've read a lot of studies over the years now. We don't eat as much like the real fast food. Germans rather eat out in restaurants, but they still get more like, at least some vegetables and salads and so on. They don't eat enough beans though. And way too much sugar as well.
Oh yeah, sugar is everywhere in all these foods, and that's definitely something I try hard to keep an eye on and just watch them, not getting too much of it.
I don't do carb intake. I don't limit that, because like the healthiest societies, they eat up to 85% of carbs. It's just a matter of what carbs. If it's refined sugar or refined flour, it's terrible.
Right.
But if it's whole sugar and like fruit, or like from grains and whole grains as much as possible as well, then that's a completely different thing. That's the thing. Like, there's been so many things about like, oh yeah, sugar is bad, or carbs are bad, and fat is bad. But it's not. It's too simple to just talk about it like that, because it's like, well, we need fats, for example, and there are healthier fats and unhealthier fats, and same with the carbs and so on. So I find the way things are talked about with diet and food is too simplistic. So people just go like, oh, so it's carbs, so I'm going to avoid carbs.
Yeah, well, a lot of the foods we're eating right now is really like a 21st century experiment. We don't know how it's going to turn out.
Yeah, especially with the bliss point. I mean, like the fact that food companies are creating foods that are meant to make us addicted, because it hits the bliss point of the right spot between like enough like fatty, salty, and sweet. To be honest, like once you change your way of eating, because I'm basically not just vegan, I'm whole food plant-based. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's actually more common in the US. In Germany, people just look at me in a funny way. And we don't even have a translation for that right now. So it's just weird how people eat and the way you're supposed to eat. Like, people have absolutely no idea anymore. Like, even it took me such a long time to figure out what is actually really healthy, because there's so many health sites as well that give advice, and they just fearmonger and then try to sell you stuff.
Yeah, and it's often very hard to distinguish the advertisements from the actual content and information.
Yeah, and even is it actual information or just misinformation to sell you crap? And that's quite common. And I see that with a lot of other people. And I see that with other people that get very sick. They're desperately trying to find a solution. And so they easily fall prey to things like that, because you kind of just need some hope in between. Like in between, I was just like, is that really the way it works? When I found some stuff that was just really shady in hindsight. And the thing is, like, when you're so sick, you also don't have the energy to even spend time on doing the research, because it does take time with all the misinformation out there. And so that I found really difficult. And the thing is, that's the way it seems for so many people. And then we also don't have much time, because we seem to be having to work more and more and more and make less and less money. And rents are rising, and like all the costs are rising, but we're not. So the result is that we're always just working the whole time, like a lot of people. When are you going to have time to kind of look into that sort of thing or make the changes? Like changing your diet requires time. That's why a lot of people don't do it, even though they probably know that it would do them better already. And they have an idea of like at least a few things that they could change, like eat less meat, for example, eat less processed foods, and so on. So that it doesn't have to be like, this extreme change of like what I've done. But it still takes time to kind of figure out like what to cook. And a lot of people even can't cook anymore, I noticed. It's very interesting. Well, for me, that's weird. I've paid for stuff like my first music website. I paid for with a 3-course menu that I cooked for the developer. So I've yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a nice trade.
Well, the thing is, I became a vegetarian when I was like 15 or something like that. And so my parents were like, well, if you want to be a vegetarian, you're going to have to cook for yourself. And I had to learn how to cook beforehand anyways, because I'm East German, and so my mum was always working as well. So it basically meant that as soon as my brother and I were old enough, we had to learn how to do all the chores as well. So we learned how to do at least like, pasta with tomato sauce or something like that, and things like that. So I, like, my brother also cooks. I think it's just a matter of socialization, that you're brought up in a certain way. And with Americans, you have so many people where they don't have much time, especially all the people with like 2 or 3 jobs, or maybe even more. And like all the time they have is basically just to run to a store, buy something that can throw maybe in the microwave or just heat up in some other way, and then prep, or they go to some fast food chain, I guess, even though it's still probably a bit more expensive than if they cook themselves.
Yeah,
but it's just...
That's true. My wife and I try to avoid going out to eat and cook at home as much as we can. But this stuff really does apply a lot to making music, being productive, because we do let this stuff go often, and you will do better work when you feel better.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember, I think it was the last time I went on a little tour, and never anything too major, a couple weeks up and down the East Coast of the United States. But we were eating lousy, we're going out, we're in bars every night, and by the end of the tour, the last show, I got so sick that I was unable to play the last show. We actually skipped it and went straight home, just because I was so sick and beat up from not taking care of my health and just running my body through the ringer for those 2 weeks, that we couldn't even do the final show.
Yeah, for me, for example, because I basically had underlying health issues for like over a decade, I kept, like, when I got a cold, I was basically a week out.
Wow.
Like I would probably start working from bed on the 3rd day again or something, but it was just bad. And now I hardly ever get anything like a cold. Mostly it's something where I feel like, got the sniffles a bit, maybe, yeah. Feel a bit tired, and then just feel like I can't concentrate on my work, and then I just go like, oh, maybe I'll take a nap. I mean, that's a good thing when you're working from home. And so I just take a nap for a couple of hours, then maybe take the rest of the day off, like work only a half day or something. And next day I'm perfectly fine again, and everything's good. And I also make the point that I give myself the time to kind of just sleep, because sleeping seems to be the best way for me to recover. Because like, what's the point of just going like, I'm just going to ignore it and keep working? Because in the end, you're going to pay for it. I mean, you might not pay for it then, but like at least for me, it was that I was out for a long time, and I basically lost years for music because of being sick.
Wow, yeah, and that's something we're all trying to find is more time to actually make our music. I was listening to a podcast on Joe Rogan's show, and he had, I think it was Matthew Walker, a sleep expert, on, and he was talking about just the importance of sleep and what it does to us when we don't get enough sleep, and how our performance drops and how our health suffers, our body isn't able to rejuvenate and repair. And it was actually kind of scary because I don't always get my 8 hours, and listening to him talk about some of the consequences of that was really eye-opening.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference, right?
It does, and it's important that we are taking care of ourselves, and it's so often that our health, our diet, or our exercise is like one of the first things to go when we get really busy.
Yeah, really. Like for me, I tried meditation, and it on its own, it's not working for me at all. But in yoga, I can get totally zoned out, and I like doing yoga with videos because then I just do it for longer. And then sometimes, like after a while, I notice like, oh, we've been doing something completely else already, and I just completely spaced out because I got so into like a meditative state of mind, being like. Mostly it's something I like doing vinyasa yoga for that, because you have the kind of like the breathing and the movements. I feel it's quite a lot like music as well in that sense, because I can always count in my head when I do something, even when I cut vegetables or something. But that's a kind of like a good way to kind of just concentrate on like the counting and the breathing and so on. I find that. Otherwise, I have quite often like way too much stuff going through my head, and I find like just concentrating on these two things is enough to keep the other thoughts out and just kind of calm in the moment.
Yeah, I find that a lot of my favorite activities tend to have one thing in common, and that is that they sort of help me forget about things and clear my mind a little bit, where it's sort of the only thing that I'm able to focus on while I'm doing it. And it helps me come back to whatever's going on in my life with a fresh perspective, because I'm able to take a break from it. And even if it's, say, something like yoga where you're struggling to hold the pose and it's really stressful and you're going through like this different kind of physical stress, I think it's kind of a nice way to give the mental stress a break in your, through your practice, and by just doing the types of things that are going to let you kind of let go of those endless thoughts for a little while.
Yeah, for me, like for example, the interesting thing for me was like they did blood tests when I was so sick. But the thing was, so I got very sick when I just moved to Mauritius for 3 months. And I was like, what? So I'm here. I'm not sure if I should fly back. It's not like doctors ever found anything before. And I found it really interesting, like the contrast to like the way we live in the Western world, and the way they still live, and the way how like my nearest neighbor was the 70-year-old woman living downstairs, and she can bend over and touch her feet.
Yes.
Like easily. And I was like, I don't know any 70-year-olds in Germany or anywhere really that can do this otherwise. Like it's just like most people my age can't do this. Like I could hardly do it then at all. I was so stiff anyways. And I thought it was really interesting how obviously we're doing something really wrong and they're still doing something better because they're not quite living like us yet.
Right. That's awesome.
And they also they seem to be more, like generally more social as well. Like we tend to kind of just isolate ourselves a lot more. Like there's less kind of community spirit, I find.
Yeah,
at least
that
like
seems to be like a really large factor in longevity, in that you're part of a community and you belong.
Yeah, basically feeling not alone as well. Feeling like if there is something going wrong for you, that there's other people that you can lean on, no matter what it is. I think that is like the biggest part, and a lot of people feel very lonely these days.
Yeah, and I could agree with that. I think we even see shades of that in our little music production communities, that we have each other to lean on and help each other and know that other people are going through the things we're going through and have the same problems and issues. And I always like to joke around about, like, say I'm compressing a snare drum and I lower the threshold by like a couple dB, and I get so excited I want to talk about it. But no, most people don't. Maybe they'll humor you a little bit. They don't really understand what you're talking about because it's so kind of deep and nerdy in this topic of like making music. But it's great to have other people that are around that can understand that for you and be part of that community.
Yeah, definitely. It's just I don't know. This just reminded me of like the one song where I couldn't figure out what was missing for the song, and I played it to fellow producers, and every single one was like, "It needs hi-hats," and it was driving me insane because I tried hi-hats before, and it was just, no, it's not the hi-hats, and no one else and I felt like maybe I should play it to someone else like who has nothing to do with music, who just listens to music, because they might explain it in completely different words, but kind of give you the idea, whereas like the other producers gave you like a concrete idea that you'd already tried and then you knew it wouldn't work. So yeah, it's kind of
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to get the perspective of people that are not musicians and not into like producing, because they'll offer you feedback that isn't so concrete. They're not going to tell you, well, I think you need a new harmony in the fourth.
in pictures.
Yeah, they'll talk like that in metaphors and pictures and images and feelings. And sometimes I find that sort of way of looking at music helps get me inspired and gets me out of like the technical edge, the technical side of things so much, and think about things in a more emotional and, that kind of level.
Yeah, I find that more interesting quite often than like producers do go like to their typical solution, I guess, most of the time. Because other people just kind of, they don't know the terminology, so they kind of use a different way of talking about the music, which can in turn give you ideas, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you even understand what they're saying. And it doesn't really matter in the end. And I think that's quite interesting, that they just give you an input that you kind of take, and you try to even understand it. It's like you translate from different languages as well, and so you get different results. Like I always like playing it to people that hardly ever listen to music except for like charts music, like things on the radio or something, and then see how they react. Like for example, if they go like, "Yeah, it's nice," and I go like, "Yeah, that needs work." Like nice, I'm not doing nice.
Yeah, and I think it depends on how you present it too, because when you say, hey, what do you think of this so far? I'm working on it. People tend to look for things that need to be worked on and what needs to be fixed. But when you say, oh, here's my new song, what do you think? It's done, it's finished, and we kind of accept it as a finished thing.
I think it depends on the person. Like critical people will always give you like, oh, I think there's this and there's that.
It's true.
And then others will just go like, yeah, it's good. But the thing is like, I always try to get in, like, I don't care if people hate my songs, but I don't like if they go like, yeah, it's nice. And it's like, yeah, no, sorry. Like it has to be hate or love, but like if it's just nice, then it's not noticeable enough, especially not anymore these days when there's so much more music every day.
Yeah, it needs to have some sort of impact one way or another.
Yeah, and I mean, like the thing is, like, I've had friends of mine kind of that just listen to music, explain like what kind of images they see when they listen to a song of mine. I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted, And it was weird, like they had really weird stories that they was kind of hearing in the music, but it was great because it didn't matter, like if they had the exact story that I had in mind, or if it was just the general feeling and they made their own story out of it.
Yeah, totally. One thing I like to do in my high school English classes is to use music and have them analyze lyrics. And, I guess that's my excuse of how it's English.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to hear, I get a wide variety of different people in that class. Some are musicians, but most, I would say, aren't. And I get to hear how they would explain music in these non-musical terms, that not technical terms that your average musician is going to use. They're not going to talk about like counterpoint and harmony. They're going to just explain how it makes them feel. And it's really interesting sometimes how it comes out a lot different, and it's often colored by people's musical backgrounds, and the emotional impact changes because of that. So it's a cool way to like get a sense of like how people hear music. Because like I think that sometimes our musical knowledge is like almost like baggage,
Yeah.
and it gets in the way of how we interpret sound and music.
Yeah, I try to stay away from that. I didn't fully study electroacoustic music, so I don't have a degree in it. But I studied media design, and I could try and get into courses at the music conservatory for electroacoustic music. And I always passed because I had I was classic trained, and they wanted you to know about computers as well already, and I fit that. And the reason for that was because I already knew quite a lot of people that studied music when I was still playing in bands as a teenager. And every single one of them told me that I had my own style and I should not study music because they would just crush that. And I think they're right, because I was sometimes sitting outside waiting for the next course to begin, and you could listen to the composition course. And I was just like, oh God, that's so boring. Yeah, you do like this, and then this, and then this, and then you have a standard song again. Like, I don't know, why would I want to do that again? It's like, I kept having that problem already as a teenager, and then I kept using really weird tunings on the guitar and kind of making up my own chords where I just tried to not go with any music theory, but just kind of put the fingers in different places and then just kind of checked how it sounded. And because I started playing something, you kind of trying to make up a song, and then I go like, oh, that's that song already. Oh, and that too. Yeah. Because like my parents had a tiny apartment when I was born, so they kept putting headphones on my ears if they wanted to just have some peace and quiet from me. They were really young, so. And so, for example, there's certain albums where I feel really weirdly small when I listen to them, and I think all of that kind of really kind of burned, like the harmonies and everything kind of burned themselves into me as well, because I listened to a lot of like the Beatles and stuff as well, and apparently Jimi Hendrix as well, because I liked it, and so. I think it's always kind of good to be able to step away from all the theory and everything, but to be able to get back to it when you get lost. That's basically the way I try to use music theory at all. I just try not to kind of just go into music theory. That's the biggest issue I have about Ableton Push, by the way. Like, because like the in key mode is the only one that kind of makes sense for the amount of keys that I like, the octaves that I need.
Okay.
But then I have to set a key already in the beginning, and it's like I never do that. I just play something. So
you'd like to have those notes that don't fall in the key, but otherwise there's not enough pads to play.
Yeah, I basically always have that. But whenever I try to do a live performance setup for a song with Push, I always notice that I can't set it to the key that the song is in.
Yeah, you have too many renegade notes.
Yeah, apparently that's like I've heard that from like early on, where it's like, oh, that's quite a bold move to kind of have that in there. And it's like, really? I don't hear it like that. So and I think it's kind of...
I kind of think that's where a lot of the magic happens in music, and those notes that don't make sense in the scale, that are outside of it, that happen and they're not supposed to work, but they do, and they sound special. And I'm kind of thankful, as much as I'm grateful for my musical theory and the understanding that I have, I'm also happy that I don't know it so well that nothing is a surprise anymore, and that things don't sound special, that I can just theorize it, where now there's like a little bit of magic and mystery to making music that I find exciting.
Yeah, that you don't have it in the forefront of your head all the time. I think that's important.
Yeah, because I know, like myself, sometimes I'll be playing some music, maybe on my guitar or something, and I'm into it, I'm enjoying it, but then, like, some little part of my music theory mind jumps in and says, well, that's the 1-4-5 progression, it's too simple. And it gets in the way of me enjoying what I'm doing. This, like, kind of like technical snob comes out and says, hey, no, this is too simple. But before I thought that, I was actually enjoying what I was doing.
Mm.
And I think what you said about
I
the
had
guitar tuning is such a cool thing because it allows you to start playing without always knowing what notes you're playing. You kind of forget the relationship of the notes because the strings are all tuned differently.
Yeah.
And that's one of the fun things you can do with a guitar that you can't always do with, say, like a keyboard instrument. Just change the tuning.
Or you switch instruments. That's what I like doing as well. Just try different instruments that have different layouts. Like, like you've got the guitar layout and keyboards and Rhodes has a different layout. Then have an area Mbira, which has another different layout that goes by the circle of fifth, which is amazing. Like, if I ever had to teach music theory to children, that's the instrument I'd use.
What was the instrument?
It's called area Mbira. It's two music instrument makers from San Diego who just make them. So it's basically the basis of is like an mbira or kalimba. That's pretty much the same instrument. Just one, like the kalimba is from Zimbabwe, and then from South America they have the kalimba as well. And so it's basically the same like thumb piano, just big. And I've got a 4-octave one. There's like 200, 250 in the world. And I call these kind of instruments pling plong sounds. You see out there, like all the sounds that you have in children's songs quite often as well, for example. And it's just the way it's like, if you want to play a major chord, it's always the same positioning for the fingers.
Yeah, I think I saw a video of you playing that, actually. It was maybe like a making of the track kind of thing where you're playing that instrument. And a lot of cool like reversed sounds going on.
Yeah, I do a lot of reversing anyways.
Yeah, that's something I love and I've gotten from, listening to the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix. Those sounds, when I got a tape recorder, it was like one of the first things I wanted to do was flip up over the 4-track tape and then reverse things and hear what they sound like.
Yeah, my tape deck, I was so happy to find one that I could pay for when I was a teenager that could reverse play things as well. Or you could just adjust the speed as well. So I even did things like for like short films and stuff where I just changed the like I recorded something and then played it on the tape and then recorded it on another tape or something. And just change the speed to kind of give it a certain atmosphere, like how something kind of slowly breaks down or something for a part in a short film and things like that. I always liked that. Did you do all the ping-ponging stuff as well with tape decks?
Like bouncing the tracks around?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back and forth so you could record more stuff and then you end up with lots of noise.
Right. Yeah. We record 3 tracks, bounce them to the 4th track, and then of course you're stuck with the mix, and you record 2 more tracks and bounce those with the other 4 you recorded. And it would eventually start to sound like a washed out mess, but it was always something that I loved about using the 4-track. I used to call it like the 4-track magic because these harmonics and things would happen, and it almost sounded like there were other instruments being played inside the song.
They kind of are, because it's the way the way something is recorded and can be erased, so it kind of can be moved a bit further after a while. Yeah, I did I didn't have a 4-track. I did it like on a normal tape deck, so just like that. So that was even more noise, and I just recorded it with a microphone on the tape recorder itself, like
nice.
As a kid. Before I even heard of tape recorders or anything like that, like 4 tracks. But that 4-track recording was like the first thing we did as a band as well.
Yeah, my buddy and I figured something out. He had a karaoke machine and it had two tape decks. So we learned like if we put the microphone up to the speaker, we could also play something into the other mic jack. And so we were like recording it in such a terrible way, but it was so exciting because we were doing overdubs and we were actually like
Hmm.
we were compiling like tracks just like we were in like our little studio. Really exciting. Those were fun days.
Yeah, I remember the fact that when we did the first 4-track recording, I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And we didn't manage to record one song, and it was basically mine. So I was like, could I borrow the 4-track and just try to record it myself? And I actually did. In between the crying of the twins, the twin babies living upstairs, that was not fun. But it was interesting. Like that's basically how I got into like I felt like the way I was making music and then music production that seemed very much like one thing to me. It never occurred to me that those were different jobs.
Oh yeah, right. You're just doing them all at once by yourself.
Yeah, you kind of have an idea how things should sound, and even then I was listening to quite a bit of electronic music already, and I kind of always had the idea to kind of mix it together with other instruments and just kind of so have like a mix of different sounds as well, and I think the way to even do most of that requires some music production skills.
Yeah, that's right. And I actually didn't even mention this yet, but you have a background. You worked with Ableton for a while doing tech support, correct?
Yeah, well, it started as a custom care and tech support, and then they quickly realized that I was way better at helping people than selling things.
That's
And so
funny.
I did that for like 2 years, and then they didn't want to renew my contract and offered me a freelance position, but that wasn't well paid, and I was like, ah, nah, I already had the idea of Sonic Bloom at this point, because I noticed while I was doing tech support that there were a lot of people desperate to kind of just get help with like how to use Ableton Live, not how to fix something going wrong in it.
Right, right.
And of course, that's not what tech support is. And so I thought like, well, looks like there's something I could do. Plus, I was really annoyed because like you keep writing the same emails back over and over and over. And of course, you have something where you can add snippets, so you have like tutorials that you can copy in quickly as well. But there were certain tutorials where I couldn't find anything that was really solid, where they didn't skip like a little step in between. That seemed really simple and logical to them, but you have to assume that they might not know much about computers at first either.
Hmm.
Because we did like, especially the live light users, there were a riot sometimes. And there were some people going like, when you said like, can you see it on your desktop? And we're like, you mean my desk? And it's like, okay, we're gonna start at computer 101. And so I just realized that there weren't that many tutorials that really explained every step thoroughly. So I just asked at work, can I write tutorials on my music website and just post that? Because I'm tired of just writing the same thing over and over. And they were like, well, if it's just tutorials and not promotional, I was like, no, I really don't care about that much. I don't want to have to do the same thing over and over every day. They were like, sure. And then my colleagues started sharing that, and I already got traffic through that. So basically, that was the beginning of Sonic Bloom without being Sonic Bloom.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love beginning stories like this where it's not necessarily that you decided I'm going to make Sonic Bloom. It's just that your experience and what you were doing kind of naturally led you to this path to where you are right now.
Yeah, you basically, like, at least I was looking for something like how I could make money on my own, because like even if you're just part-time employed, it's still, you have to be flexible for the employer, not the other way around. So for example, when I was working at Ableton and I tried to get time off for a little Sicily tour, and they were like, no, 2 people have already taken time off, it's not possible. And I was like, oh crap, I'm gonna have to get up really early and do my 4-hour emailing shift there. And and it has to be a secure line as well, which is, difficult enough to do when you're on tour. And they even were like, can you do some more shifts? I was like, what?
That's a little tough to do while you're on tour.
And yeah, I mean, like basically you kind of have to be self-employed if you want to be able to tour, unless you do something like teach, I guess, where you have longer stretches where you don't have to teach because kids have summer holidays and so on. So you do actually have time in between every year. But otherwise, with normal jobs, like you're gonna have to take some time off. And if you take your holidays to just tour all the time, that's gonna be terrible for your health as well. So I've always found, like, plus I don't think I'm a good employee. Again, not in the sense that I don't do good work, but like I quite often have like criticism where I would like to improve things for them as well, because I like workflow things, and quite often they just go like, "Ooh, she's a troublemaker," and they're like, "Oh, okay, wasn't meant that way," and I just feel like I'm better suited to just kind of deciding myself what I should do, and most of the time I'm quite good at just getting up and really doing the work. And I've just felt I was basically always looking for something that I could do, and I tried like freelance design and stuff like that, and that's terrible in Berlin. Like no one wants to pay you anything. I mean, even the teaching, I couldn't just teach in Berlin because it just wouldn't be enough money because the prices are so low, and people really had, like most musicians are so broke, they don't have any money to pay you, and so when I was working at Ableton, I noticed that there were a lot of people from like villages, for example, and they wanted to just do something. I thought like, well, there's the internet. I mean, as long as they have the internet, then it just means we could do it through Skype or something. And I mean, yeah, you have to find ways around certain things. Like, for example, you can't properly teach anything to do with mixing through Skype. So you kind of have to send things back and forth, for example, instead. Or teaching how to use push is really not ideal through Skype. But a lot of things are not that different. Like you can walk people through how to set something up, for example, or like I've helped a lot of people set up really weird controllers because I think I'm a bit known for like having a weird taste in controllers. Like I'm mostly like anything that people don't use normally as MIDI controllers, like using Wiimote, for example. I was so excited when I heard that you can use game controllers as MIDI controllers because I've never been a gamer. I've never even had a joystick or anything like that. So I had no clue. And then a friend of mine told me about it, and I was like, really? Oh, this is amazing. So I went to the video store and just rented the Wiimote. They were like, do you need the Wii as well? And I was like, no, just the Wiimote. Oh, do you just want an extra one? It's like, no, just the Wiimote.
You understand how this works? You need the game, right?
yeah, right? It's like, no, I want to use it for music. And they were like, okay.
Oh boy. This lady will be back, returning this angry and complaining. And that's cool that you're able to figure that stuff out and how it works. Must have given you a lot of insight, because a lot of what you're doing, I think, with customer support or tech support is trying to understand what the problem actually is or what the person is actually asking, and to do it in an effective way that doesn't offend them. I have a buddy that works for a cable company.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem is that the cable box isn't plugged in. That's almost always what it is. But you can't offend them and insult them by saying, did you plug in the cable box? Mm-hmm. So he's got like another way he does this. He says, is the green light on the box? And what that will lead people to do is to check and then realize, oh, it's not plugged in. Silly me. Sorry to waste your time. Thanks for your help. And they hang up happy in that situation. See, what I do for this sort of thing is I just say like, well,
I just want to make sure that we've looked at all the possible problems. I'm going to take you through like the simplest and most stupid one. It's probably not going to that, and then just walk you through that. So this is kind of like, is it plugged in, and so on and so forth. So then it's not about them, just having to feel stupid, but like, the thing is, like, everyone does that sometimes. Like, we saw, like, I've like, why like even earlier when I was sound checking, it's like, why doesn't the mic work? It's like, well, might have to turn on the receiver first.
Oh man. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've embarrassed myself like that, where I'm fiddling with a guitar and I can't get any sound, and either the cable's not plugged in or why isn't this working? And it's like, well, that tuner pedal you have is not even connected to your amplifier.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing is, like, everyone does it over and over again because it just
to press record.
Yeah, if it's like you might be just tired or something, or feeling a bit under the weather, or you're just thinking about other things because you're stressed out or whatever. There's always something why you might not think of doing something, and then afterwards go like, oh damn, I was so stupid, whatever. Everyone does it. So
yeah, it's true. My wife told me the story that she learned about with Disney. One of the big common questions that Disney employees get is, what time is the 3 o'clock parade? And when you hear the way they ask the question, you're like, idiot, the 3 o'clock parade's at 3 o'clock. What time do you think it is? And the thing is, though, they're not really asking you what time the parade is. They know what time the parade is. They're looking for advice on where's the best place to sit, where can I get a good view. That's the kind of thing they want to know. And it's important to be able to determine what they're looking for, because sometimes when you're in the when you're in the heat of the moment and you're stressed, you're not thinking clearly. You might not be formulating your questions just right. And that's the famous Disney example. What time is the 3 o'clock parade?
yeah, especially if we don't know the words to ask the right question. Like that with technical stuff, quite often it's like that, where it just explains something and then you just go like, Like in tech support, it was, for me, it was kind of like a game to get better at guessing what they meant. Because you get the weirdest emails as well, just like one quick sentence, or just like sometimes like emails like help, even you just go like, dude, you could have just written a little bit more maybe, because now I'm gonna have to write this like, what can I help you with?
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it's not a very well phrased question.
But it just basically, I think they're just panicking. Like that was interesting for me as well. Like, for example, how much technical support and also teaching, because it's quite similar in that regard, is like psychology in the end. Because, like, for example, in tech support, you had people calling who were shouting at you because they had a gig in an hour and nothing was working. And the first thing you have to do is to make them calm down enough so they can explain what the problem is. Because they generally can't even talk and think anymore because they're so stressed out. And so the first thing you have to do is kind of find a way how to calm them down, and tell them to calm down is not a good way to do it.
Yeah, I've noticed that doesn't work.
Yeah,
too well.
I don't know why. Maybe it's too patronizing.
Yeah, that's definitely something I've had to learn along the way.
Oh, okay, so you're one of those.
Not anymore. I think I've kind of figured that out by now.
Yeah, if you want to make me really angry, that's a good way to try it. And you don't want to make me angry. Like people have told me that I'm scary when I'm angry. Which is for me good to know, because if there's really something I need, I'll just go to scary.
Well, you've got that power, a little extra gear.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm really glad we got a chance to talk about a lot of these different topics that don't always get brought up in these discussions about making music and stuff. But I definitely want to get to your site a bit. Lots of cool stuff. And one of the things I always loved is your Macs for Live devices. And you're pretty tightly intertwined with Macs for Cats, which is really making some awesome devices.
Yeah. Well, this is basically giving away a secret. Well, basically, we used to date. So we got to know each other when we were both working at Ableton. He still does work for Ableton.
That's Christian Klein, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And basically, he was always kind of just building stuff, and then he asked me what I thought of it. And at some point, I was like, "What are you going to do with it?" And he had some things on his music website, but everything just for free. And he'd started working as the Max for Life developer for Ableton, and so he was basically trying to get better at home as well, and just kind of trying to kind of look at other people's patches back then, and just kind of learning like the really advanced stuff, like all the things that he was interested in, and the thing is, like, he's crazy about synths and anything old analog. Like, his studio is so huge. He still's got like half of his stuff in this building, even though he doesn't live here anymore for a year now. And so he kind of really got into developing things like that kind of have like taking something from the analog world and just kind of looking at what's possible now that it's digital, like all the new possibilities. Plus, he's also a musician. So I basically just like, well, I could sell it through Sonic Bloom if you're interested. Actually, the way it first worked, like the first two devices, they were actually commissions. Like from a really famous producer from Cairo. Like, he's really well known in the Arab world. Hassan El Sharif. He's even, or was, I don't know if he still is, a jury member of Arab Idol.
Oh, cool.
So that kind of level, he was basically producing all the big stars in the Arab world. And he got in touch with me for some lessons because he felt stuck with his own stuff, because he always basically went back to the pop stuff that he was producing for others, and he got really frustrated with that. And he also wanted two devices, and I just asked Christian, so do you want to do it? And he was like, oh yeah, that sounds like an interesting thing, actually. I think that could be useful for others too. I think we should ask him if he would mind just paying half and then it being available for everyone. And that's basically how the first two Max for Cats releases on Sonic Bloom happened. And then afterwards, we're basically just kind of trying to, like, he builds stuff and then he kind of gives me things to kind of have a look at and kind of just decide with him as well what we're going to put out. Like, kind of just seeing, like, for example, like what seems to be interesting. Like, for example, it seems like synthesizers aren't that big a thing anymore because I think everyone has way too many already. And I helped him with like getting better at like, interface design, because that's something that I studied with media design as well, and he had no clue. So I kept looking at it and it's like, I don't understand this. Like, does that belong together? I basically knew what it was supposed to do, but I tried to look at it from like someone's perspective who doesn't now know how certain devices are built, and to make it like easy to use. So basically UX, and so it's always kind of been in a collaboration. And I told him how to kind of build a WordPress website and stuff as well. And so that just works. Whereas the relationship at some point was, okay, let's just leave it. But like, he does like developing things for fun, and then we just set a date, and then he'll just finish something, and he doesn't like selling things, and I mean I don't like selling things either, but I found a good way how to get enough people to Sonic Bloom and then eventually buy something as well. That it works quite well. So
yeah, I'm a big fan of those devices. They're great.
Yeah, he's really good. I mean, like, he's doing it full time, so that makes a huge difference.
It's really awesome. And it just came out with Color.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that device. Color, just so everyone knows, is a device that allows you to put like all different kind of like lo-fi effects. So you got like the vinyl crackle, the tape hiss noise that you can get. So it sounds like you recorded on a tape recorder. And it's even got the like kind of warble of the tape machine heads.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, that's so fun.
Yeah.
Actually, one of my favorite little techniques to do in live is to take the frequency shifter device and put it on a track and just put a very small amount of frequency shifting at a really slow rate to just kind of emulate the way a tape would kind of slowly move things around inside, like, just be slightly in and out of tune. I'd have to check how much movement. It's very small. You hardly notice it.
Just a couple of cents, I guess.
Yeah, just enough to like kind of feel like that movement, that kind of lo-fi-ness that having things recorded on tape has. I love doing that. And yeah, this device is great because it does it in a really nice way with lots of character and little charm. If you want to lo-fi things up a bit, it's really, really good for that.
Yeah, plus you can use it as like a really cool DJ filter even. I'm definitely going to put that into my live performance set because it's like an unexpected kind of filter because of all the grid in it.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. That's really cool. There's a lot of nice devices in there, all kinds of different things that you can use and get a huge variety of sounds and effects.
Yeah, for me, my personal favorite is Cat Stretch because it's really great for sound design stuff, and I do a lot of sound design for my music, like especially with the last album. I kind of went more away from like harmonies and just tried to kind of work with just more noises as well that don't necessarily have to be in a specific key or something.
Yeah, I noticed that about your music. There's a lot of textural stuff going on in there.
Yeah, lots of details as well. I drive myself crazy with the details sometimes.
Yeah, right? Don't we all? That's something I really liked and enjoyed about the music that you're putting out is it's got this kind of earthy, textural, kind of like organic living thing going on to it where it's got like some character and these like unique sounds going on.
Oh yeah, I understand a warmth basically in the sound. Yeah, I don't like cold sounds, like all the cold sounding synthesizers. Most of the digital synthesizers, especially the presets that sound very cold, I hated them. I've always hated them, even as a kid when it was the 80s, So, and I think it's also because I work, first of all, with lots of actual instruments and then with field recordings. So I only discovered synthesizers kind of fairly recently as something that I really find interesting, because when I was working at Ableton, I like to shock people to say like, I hate synthesizers. And everyone was like, what? Yeah. And I mean, I didn't hate synthesizers, but I realized that there's a lot of synthesizers I don't like the sound of personally. Because I really like Moogs, because they sound really warm as well. So
yeah, I've definitely gotten myself into a little analog synthesizer obsession where, I can't get enough of them and they all have their own character and stuff. But I come from a background of playing like acoustic instruments and guitar, was my main thing. And, growing up, I had like all these like kind of weird rules, like about the music that I liked. I didn't always like it if a song had a drum machine in it. And the funny thing now, when I look back, is like a lot of the music that I enjoyed actually did have drum machines. I just wasn't bright enough to realize it. But it's funny how we sort of draw these lines in the sand about our musical tastes, and we use those to sort of identify our own little way and style about going about making music.
See, for me, it was like, I didn't like drum machines for my own music. I always felt like if I wanted I don't like instruments much quite often that imitate some other instrument. Like, for example, it took me a long time to find any string synthesizers that I liked, especially the way they were mixed with all the, endless reverb. Because if I can't have strings, I'm gonna try to find a different way, not just get fake strings. I mean, I've put some pizzicato and so on in that's fake because that's hard to detect. That doesn't sound as fake, if you don't listen closely, and most other people don't recognize that anymore, especially now that all the scores are basically or a lot of the scores are made with sampled instruments and not like orchestras anymore because it's cheaper. But I just always felt like I couldn't do drum machines. Like we had a big rehearsal space with my second band where we could just be in the whole time. And so generally on Sunday we met at midday and then rehearsed till like 8 p.m. But of course we didn't rehearse the whole time, but did other things as well. And we swapped instruments. I played drums sometimes as well, which I kind of miss because no one wants to let me play drums anymore because I'm left-footed and left-handed. And that means that for most people, I would have to rearrange their drum kit, and they're not really keen on that.
That's funny.
But
the first person that I played in bands with that was a drummer was actually a lefty, so his drum set was always set up.
Right.
Yeah, it was always set up left-handed, and it was often left at my house, so I kind of learned to play a little bit of lefty drums. I've since changed, but it was always like a funny thing, like, yeah, we can share drums, but, I got to rearrange the whole thing because it's backwards for you.
Yeah. Yeah, see, I learned guitar the righty way because my guitar teacher didn't realize that I was a lefty because I held it the right way for lefties. And he was like, no, that's the wrong way.
That's funny. My guitar teacher is actually a lefty too, but he plays righty, I think for the same reason, just like, just play righty, it'll be easier.
See, for me, it took my guitar teacher like 6 years to realize that I was a lefty. And he's like, oh, why didn't you ever say anything? And I was like, I don't know. I was 6. I mean, it was like, I probably was too shy to say something.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. What do you think? Does it really matter? Do you think there's some advantage to playing that way, or is it just however you learn is how you learn, and then you just go?
No, I actually think it's better the other way around because strumming.
Yeah.
It's kind of easier, yeah.
Right, yeah. Well, when I first started, I did think it was kind of funny, like all these complicated finger placements that I'm doing with my left hand. I felt like I'd probably be better off doing with my right hand, and strumming might be a little simpler, maybe.
Mm-hmm. I found that weird when I took piano lessons because I was like, oh, damn, I'm terrible with my right hand. And the right hand had to do all the stuff. And I really like satie pieces because of that. I wonder if he's a lefty. I'm trying to find it out, but there seems to be no information about that. Because there's a lot of things where you use the left hand to play a sustained bass and then play something in the mid-range as well. And the right hand plays like really simple melodies often. So the right hand does hardly anything. And it's left hand that does everything. And I kind of took that approach for the way I place, write songs as well. Because it seems nicer for me quite often because I'm not really good on the piano. I always wanted, piano was the first instrument I wanted to learn, or violin, and my parents were like, nah, how about guitar? And I was like, well, all right, it was better than nothing. I learned all the rules, and I can play a lot of instruments because of that now, because I was like, yeah, I don't know, guitar is not the thing I want to stick with in the end, so I'm just going to keep going, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I just could never become a classical pianist or anything anymore because I started way too late with piano.
Well, I guess it kind of works out no matter what. Whatever you get used to is what you start to do, and becomes your style kind of in the end. Yeah.
Basically, I always say that I play a lot of instruments badly. I play them so that I practice until I can play the part that I want to record, that I have in mind. And then anything else doesn't really matter as much.
Yeah. Sometimes people ask me if I play the piano, they see one in the house, or play the drums, and I will be like, well, I use the piano, I use the drums. It's not that I'm really a capable player, but I know how to make the sounds I want them to make for my recordings. And then, they're kind of more like tools. I'm definitely not with any sort of finesse.
Yeah, we said I could play decent Oasis drums, but that doesn't mean much, of course. I was way more.
Yeah, I think honestly, you get pretty far. And truth be told, I think I wished a lot of people would play a little more simple like that on the drums instead of going nuts all
It
the
kind of
time.
depends on what they do. Like, for example, I noticed I kind of don't like cymbals too much in my music. I find that's kind of distracting from the vocals, for example. So I think like in this new album, I'm not sure if I have anything that could be called cymbals properly. So I don't know, I just find it interesting to kind of try and do other things as well. And with drummers, like, I don't know, the drummer of my second band, I'm still in touch with him. He actually did the Push One review because I thought he would be a good person to ask because he's good at drumming, but he wasn't good at harmonies and so on. So I wanted to hear his perspective for that sort of thing. And he was like, he basically came from the punk scene, but then we both discovered jungle. And that basically what was that tied us together, which was really amazing because like he was like playing jungle stuff that either couldn't be played at all sometimes, or that they played with two drum kits, like two drummers. And he was like, but it works, you know?
That's right. Yeah.
And we did a first track together on a tracker software. I don't remember the name of the tracker software because I didn't have that. And I'm not even sure if it was his computer or if he had borrowed it from a friend as well. But like that's the way, like where I really tried to get into like composition as well. I was like, oh, you should put in some pizzicato strings. I mean, everything sounded kind of terrible back then. Like the sounds, none of that I liked. I always had a problem with keyboards for that reason as well, because I would always try to keyboard the presets and they're like, oh, no, oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, I think a lot of times presets might be designed more to sell the machine. They're always over the top. They're using all these effects and they might sound good on a solo instrument in the music store, but when you try to put them inside a song, unless they're the only element going on, it's way too over the top and there's just too much going on for it to be useful.
Yeah, or they're a really specific sound where you sound like a specific genre almost. And like for me, I've been told to pick a genre and stick with it. That's one of my favorite comments that I've ever gotten. And I just wrote back, I don't do genres. Because quite frank, I don't understand the concept really well, like where one ends and the next begins. And I always notice that I like music that kind of combines different elements of different styles. Because like if you go with the rules of a certain genre, you're kind of boxed in quite early on. And I always found that really boring. And I've always listened to a lot of different music. And so it was like, I could never imagine to just kind of, I don't know, make rock music or, I don't know, drum and bass or anything. Because it's just like, that's not how music works for me. I try to kind of tell stories. So a different genre might work for that particular song, but not for nothing else that I make.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. Like, I think today we've kind of gone a little genre happy and we're trying to define everything where the difference between like, especially electronic music where the differences are so subtle, it's really difficult to just give it a name.
Yeah, where you just go like, oh, so you just change the kick from this position to that position and then you have a different type of house or something like that. And you're like, okay, that's straight. But then how can you make music? Why not just make the same track over and over again? You just exchange the drum kit, maybe, and then change the chords around a bit, like, you know, in the bass line, and that's it. Like, I don't know.
I think that's what happens sometimes.
Yeah, I think so. Like, a lot of people seem to work with templates where they have all the presets that they like the best in there already. But I can't even imagine doing that because I don't even start a new song the same way. I always kind of try to do it differently, and I try to switch instruments and approaches so that I can't repeat myself as well, and it keeps things interesting for me.
Yeah, I hear what you mean. And I like to explore sounds and do things differently a lot all the time. I've been sort of entertaining this idea though of setting up like certain instruments for say like a project, like a group of songs, and just kind of sticking with them so that I can kind of focus, so that I'm not constantly looking for new sounds or doing sound design or programming synthesizers. I'm just using these particular sounds, and that whole decision making process is out the window. I think a lot of like, playing in like a rock band, for instance, like, your presets, your instrumentation is pretty much the same in every song. There's slight differences, I guess, but I think it might be like a decent idea for me at least to kind of back off on constantly designing sounds and constantly trying to do something different every song, and just maybe make a group of songs that are all consistent with like the certain type of sounds pre-programmed into the set.
See, for me, I kind of always try, but the thing is, like, I use a lot of field recordings, and with the field recordings, I like to go by the lyrics of the song. So, for example, my latest song that I produced is called Volcanoes. So obviously, I couldn't get any recordings of a volcano that quickly, and like even like I have some really nice recordings of mud pools from New Zealand, but it's on a videotape, and my camera's broken. So I was like, oh no, that's just good. That's going to take me weeks to figure out how to get into the computer. So I just went on YouTube this time and just kind of looked for like volcano eruptions. And I just recorded like a lot of different things as well, or lava flowing into the ocean and things like that. And then I just used some of the sounds for the drum kit. And I kind of like doing that approach where I just take a sound that has to do with what I'm singing about, basically. Either that it's something in the lyrics that directly makes a sound, like volcanoes can do, or it's by association.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot. I think that's a really cool way to work. It's so often that I go to make music and it could be anything. We're going to go anywhere, let the juices flow and the imagination run wild. But I think a lot of times I don't get anywhere with that. But your idea is really cool to just sort of set up this like direction or limitations or some sort of parameters to follow so that you can actually get things done because you're working in a direction and going somewhere with it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like basically you have to limit yourself, otherwise you're going to be stuck. Like I hear from so many students, for example, that so how do you deal with, kind of going through presets, like how you kind of go through presets forever, and then you lose your creative spark. It's like, well, I don't go through presets when I have the creative spark, because that's the dumbest idea you can have, because you get frustrated, really. That's all that's going to happen. So I just said, like, well, what if you just take, like, I quite often just take piano, because I can make sure that I can hear all the notes properly, and that the composition in itself works. Whereas, for example, if you take, to be honest, I never really liked the Live library much. I think they could put a lot more focus on that, because, like, first of all, they're all so loud that basically people that kind of get into music production, they always produce that everything is in the red. And I think it would be nicer if sound packs in general would be less loud. This is not very useful because people don't understand gain staging unless they kind of go from the kind to at least semi-professional or something, because that's kind of where you're aware of, like, oh, I keep doing this, so there must be something else I have to do first. But I think that could be helped by changing that. And then another thing was that a lot of the presets are out of tune. And I have perfect pitch, so that annoys the hell out of me. And sometimes, like in the beginning, I sometimes couldn't tell why I was like, it doesn't work. Is that bass line wrong? It's like, did I write something wrong? Is it a wrong note? And then I was like, no, music theory seems to work. And it took me a long time because I'd never assumed that it could be out of tune, because it's not something like a guitar that you should pick up and tune first.
Yeah.
So I basically always started kind of making my own presets because of that as well, because I always tried things out, got frustrated, and then I was like, I'll just take a piano sound for now, just to kind of write the structure, and then I add the sounds later. Like, I quite often now with instruments, for example, I will not mic up my vibraphone right away. The first thing I will do is get a vibraphone sound from live and just kind of try things out, and then see if it even fits at all with what I have in my head. Does it sound nice? And then I will mic things up and record things, because it's easier that way, because I don't have that much time to kind of just mess around with things.
Right. And then you can stay in the creative flow of a certain idea.
Yeah, you basically just record lots of different ideas first, and then you can still record them again, especially when you've recorded them with MIDI instruments first. You can just look at the notes. If you forget, I forget everything that I play. I have to relearn my songs all the time. It's terrible. The only thing I remember are vocal melodies and lyrics. Everything else I keep forgetting.
Well, I know that feeling.
That's good to know.
Well, I guess this is getting near the end of our time. There's still so much that I'd really like to talk to you about, but
you can always bring me on again in, I don't know, half a year, or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few things you said, like perfect pitch, that I'd really love to learn more about. But yeah, we kind of ran low on time here. But I do want to encourage everyone to head over to sonicbloom.net. If you're listening to me, you might already know about it, but it's a great site for all things Ableton Live, Push, and Max for Live. And before we go, Madeline, is there anything else you'd like to mention, or things you want to say to the audience, or places you want to direct them to check out the cool things that you are up to?
Well, they could check out my music if they're interested. It's always good to have someone listening to my music, even if it's not many people these days. But so the website would be madelinebloom.com. So, well, I could spell it out, but I could just try and confuse it with Madeline with 3 E.
Yeah, well, it's MadeleineBloom.com.
Yeah.
MadelineBloom.com. Yeah. So this will all be in the show notes, as well as a lot of the things we've talked about today. But it's definitely worth heading on over there and checking out some of your work. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you for taking the time to talk. Lots of good information here again, and I really do appreciate it.
I always enjoy talking about music with others, because you always kind of learn about different perspectives and all that. So thanks for inviting me.
And thanks to you, the listeners, for tuning in to this talk with Madeline Bloom. Definitely head down to sonicbloom.net for lots of cool stuff for your music production needs. And check back here soon for another episode. Thanks a lot for listening. Have a great day.